Don't mind the appearance. I have been running all over creation today, but I was listening to the trial. You know why? Because George Wagner took the stand in his own defense today. Somewhere Rick Nash is dying from a stroke that his client is on the stand testifying. George Wagner IV took the stand in his own defense today. What the fuck? As soon as I pick up my kid from basketball here in about 25 minutes, we are going to sit down and we are going to get into this shit because, y'all, it is interesting. And I don't know if he had the option to opt out. I don't think so. But sure glad he didn't if he did. So, and if he could, if he didn't have a choice and he had to be filmed, thank God for whoever passed that law. So now we get to hear his bullshit testimony. It is fantastic. It's fabulous. I'll see y'all back here in about 45 minutes and we will break this down. Bye. Welcome back, bitch. We are here to talk about George Wagner IV. I don't know what that piece of hair is doing, but to that lady who unsubscribed to me and left a comment saying unsubscribing because the hair flipping is too much. Like, why don't you flip your ass right out of here, okay? All right, so that piece of hair is just going to join us for the whole thing because it won't lay down. All right, y'all, buckle in. It's going to be a wild one. The only witness that we had today was George Wagner IV testifying in his own defense. Much to the surprise of everybody and probably much to the dismay of Richard Nash. All right, get your snacks ready. Got look at this cup. It's the cutest thing. So from a local place around here, if you're from here, and I mean, if you're not, she probably ships. She's on Facebook, I think. It's called The Inappropriate Mama, which, I mean, fucking same. Today's snack, Ice Gingerbread Cookie Pop. Not sponsored. Sam's Club. If Sam's Club would like to reach out and sponsor me, that'd be fucking great because I spend a lot of money there. All right, George Wagner IV testifying in his own defense. We have some things to talk about first before we get into this. First off, yes, this is tea. It's hot, but it's tea. Just try. So George Wagner testified today. He started off speaking kind of softly, ended up being a little more confident and spoke a little firmer towards the end. I did watch the entire thing. I have notes of my own, but I do have WCPO pulled up to keep me from going down 87 different rabbit holes because we've met. That's what I do. Now, I'm going to say the thing that everybody's thinking. George Wagner, you're going to want to feel sorry for him. And I mean, honestly, feeling sorry for George Wagner at this point is okay because the fact is, George and potentially Jake, these boys are not inherently bad people, I don't think. I think these boys are a product of their raising. Just like Angela and Billy are products of their raising with their shit families and the expectations that were put on them, and they passed it on to their children. And I think that they were not happy with how they did with their children because they didn't turn out to be successful. And George even says that later in his testimony, that he thinks that Angela was viewing Bullvine and Sophia as her second chance. A whole ass chunk of my hair that just fell out of that clip. I do want to make it very clear that on this channel, on this channel, we don't feel sorry for this sumbitch. We don't, because okay, fine, you had a rough life and you basically grew up in a cult. So did a lot of fucking people, and they didn't slaughter other families. And even if you didn't slaughter this family, you fucking knew about it as much as you want to deny it. You did. Like, nice try. Head over to part 2. We'll get into it. George Wagner testifies in his own defense. Day 1, part 2. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for my nose. It is running like crazy for whatever reason. Probably because it's fucking snowing outside. So, just to clarify, George Wagner, through 8 hours of testimony, ultimately says he didn't plan this, he didn't know about this, he didn't execute this, he didn't know about it afterwards, he didn't help clean up after it, he didn't lie to the cops, he didn't do anything. I don't know her. He found out what his family did when he was arrested, which is the biggest bullshit lie I have literally ever heard. As predicted, George didn't tell us anything that we didn't already know he would say and believe. as far as Tabby or Beth or anything like that. That he was just looking out for his family and had everyone's best interest in mind, and it is not his fault that they suck. Keep taking breaks to eat this popcorn. They're so fucking good. John Parker did the examination today. Rick Nash is probably too busy trying to get his blood pressure out of stroke range to do that. So John Parker did the questioning. I don't know what it's called. I'm not a fucking attorney. Did the questioning of George today, which is really unfortunate because as much as I hate to say it, I really like Nash's voice much better than John Parker's. And John Parker wears suits that are too big. So, of course, we started out with George's young life, his childhood, talking about where he grew up, what he did, etc. They started out talking about his weight. He brought up Hannah really early, Hannah Roden, really early, and was talking about how Hannah was like a little sister to him, and said that sometimes him and her had bonded over weight problems. That he had been overweight his whole life. He said the last time he was probably under 250 pounds was probably when he was 13 years old, which, I mean, I wasn't that big at 13, but can fucking relate. They, of course, talked about what it was like growing up on the farm, what chores he had to do, his relationship with his parents, which he said when he was younger, his relationship with his dad was good. It wasn't until his dad started driving a truck that he became unbearable to be around. And in what is quite possibly the best line I've heard out of anybody, when explaining why George started taking like amphetamines and stuff to stay up to drive his truck routes.
Somebody made me worse for no reason.
Okay, well, I'm sorry about that. Head to the next part. George Wagner testifying in his own defense, day 1, part 3. I love that I've already forgotten what day we're on. We're literally on the first day. So anyway, like I was saying, early on in this, while talking about Billy, George delivered what is possibly the best line I've heard out of anyone in this trial yet. He was talking about when Billy started driving a truck, that Billy had this uncontrollable desire to act like whoever he viewed as a father figure at the time, which apparently was somebody he was working with. When asked why that was, George replied, "He has daddy issues." Like, I'm done. I laughed about that for a solid 5 minutes. So, like I said, they talked about George struggling with his weight, what his chores were. He said when he grew up, he wanted to be a game warden or a forester. But his family, mainly his father, ultimately pushed him towards being a mechanic because they didn't want anyone in their family wearing a badge. According to Billy, all law enforcement was crooked, which might be the closest thing to truth that I've heard come out of Billy's mouth. I'm not saying they're all crooked, but I'm saying there's a lot of them. He also went into detail about in between doing their farm chores as children, they were taught how to commit crimes. Pick locks, steal loads from semi-trucks parked at truck stops, vending machines, how to steal those without making them look broke into. They use. My favorite was them stealing gas, or I guess it would be diesel fuel, and going around finding anybody who had a truck and asking them if they wanted to buy gas. Like, that's not sus at all. When asked about what sorts of trucks that they would look for when they were looking for trucks to steal from, he said that all 4 of them were involved in this, including Angela, but he said that Billy would target trucks from Walmart. And George said he despises Walmart. I don't know why. George said that his mother was present for these thefts 99% of the time. And they were there for these thefts from a very young age. He went into the Rocky Boot thing that that Angela and Billy had gotten in trouble for. And he also said that Billy had taught them to steal diesel fuel from trucks. So they always bought vehicles that were diesel so that they would always have free fuel. And I learned something today. George said that diesel was the gasoline of choice because it didn't explode like regular gas. Like, how have I made it to this point in my life? I'm damn near 40 years old and I didn't know that diesel fuel doesn't explode. Like, that is brand new information to me. Head over to part 4. George Wagner testifying in his own defense, day 1, part 4. My hair is going to change in all of these. I had a like acupuncture thing done today, and he put some in my scalp, so my head is really oily and gross, and my hair is just. Ugh. So, in addition to learning the tools of the trade, the how to steal and commit lots of various crimes, Billy would give Jake and George $1 as children every time they would spot a police officer. And if they didn't spot a camera or a police officer before Billy did, he would take their four-wheelers away for a week. George was talking about his childhood versus Jake's, basically that they were opposites from the beginning, that George was more of an outdoorsy guy. He liked to hunt, fish, spend time outside, where Jake was like an indoors kind of kid, collecting action figures, playing video games, watching cartoons, that sort of thing, which, whatever, there's totally different types of kids. George would talk about sneaking out to hang out with people. He goes over a whole bunch of list of like people that he had hung out with at Big Bear Lake and stuff like that, that honestly not real relevant, other than the fact that that is where he met Hannah Roden, helping her get a canoe out of the water. And he met Frankie through something else, but became friends with Frankie and hung out with Frankie at Big Bear Lake, which is also where he met Chelsea. Chelsea is Frankie's ex and the mother of his older son, Brentley. George used to sneak out before he had his driver's license, but it was mainly like to go hunt and fish at night. He said once he got his driver's license, he started sneaking out more often. He would go party. He had friends. Honestly, George kind of seems like a typical like Southern Ohio redneck kid. I mean, there's 100 of them around here, and he hung out. This is going to be so stereotypical to the local people here. Me being a Valley person and all his friends being Northwest kids. I'm sorry. I'm not saying anything, but if the shoe fits, Anyway, obscure reference to anybody who's not from here. That has a reputation as like our redneck school. Like, honestly, at this point, they're all fucking redneck schools because we're all rednecks. Anyway, so he went through like lists of friends, and basically, by the time they got older, George's friends had quit asking him to come around because they didn't like Jake. Because Jake was rude, Jake was mean, and Jake was just in general a dick. George explained a few times that him and his father got in fistfights, that he didn't get along with his family, and that once he had his driver's license, he said he spent as much time away from the house as possible, which was the exact opposite of Jake. Head over to part 5. George Wagner, Day 1, Part 5. At one point, George claimed that he didn't get along with his family so much that he actually got in his truck and took off driving. He made it 250 miles into Kentucky before he got low on gas and would either have enough gas to return home or to keep going and break down somewhere. He says that he turned back, although he later regretted it very much. And honestly, I can't say I blame him. George testified that he would hang out at Big Bear Lake with Frankie, his Uncle Chris, which is Chris Newcomb. We've talked about him several times, who was his best friend. And they would hunt, fish, go mudding, the redneck stuff. And that Angela, his mother, was not very happy about it, because George was basically leaving Jake at home to do all the work by himself. He went on a little bit of a bitter rant here about his first truck. Now, I will say, these boys have good taste in trucks. I'll give them that. George said that when him and Jake were with their permits and getting ready to drive, that Jake had wanted a truck that he said didn't exist, but apparently it did. Now, I've never heard of this type of truck, but it was a 1971 Chevy with a Cummins engine in it. George testified that they were down in Kentucky, and Jake said they were driving, and Jake said he saw one. Everybody thought he was lying, but they turned around to go look, and sure shit, there was one. And Billy turned the car around, went back and bought it for him. And George testified that he thinks it was somewhere around $16,000. He also made a point of saying that his mother made his father do that. We all know who Angela's favorite was. George said that he was still bitter about it because he had been denied a truck that he had picked out, which was around the same price. But then they went and spent that on a truck for Jake. And then several months later, George's dad, Billy, came home with a truck that he paid $2,500 for. That I think he also said was like a 79 Chevy. I'm a big lover of the 70s GM trucks, the Chevys and GMCs. Love them. Then we went into about an hour of him describing each individual home that they had, followed by how they burnt them down. Because apparently that was their thing. He said that Angela taught Billy how to do it. That they would stuff newspaper under the fuse box, and they were living in shitty trailers. She didn't like them, so she burned it down. Frederica remodeled one. They didn't like it, so they burnt that down, built another house, burned that one down, etc. One of the houses was a trailer bought by Frederica that they later built onto, and George called it a Kentucky Wonder Mansion. I love that. Head to part 6. Guess who already forgot what part we're on? I think it's part 6. So George then went into other details about basically their life of fraud, the different things that they did to make money in a very fraudulent. So there was obviously the burning down houses. They were big fans of that. They also at one point burned down a barn, and I think it killed a whole bunch of dogs. I'm sorry, I don't want to be the one to tell you that, but I'm pretty sure it did. And Frederica had done the same thing. If you remember a while back, they talked about accusations that grandmother Frederica Wagner had torched a horse barn on her property and killed a whole bunch of her miniature horses, all for insurance money, of course. George went briefly into the fact that Angela ran a fraudulent dog breeding business, or at least it was partially fraudulent. She bred French bulldogs and Labrador retrievers. The French bulldogs, or I'm sorry, not French bulldogs, English bulldogs. English bulldogs, she would breed those. Those were legit. If you got an English bulldog from her, it was legit because those are kind of hard to fake. Now, a lab, on the other hand, she would say the dog had 8 puppies or whatever. He said that she would then go find dogs at the pound that looked like the puppies to say that there were more. If they had a white spot and all the other ones were black, she would dye it black, whatever. It was at this point that my Pike County husband informed me that when he was a teenager, this would have been like 2004, so he would have been like 18, that he had tried to get a job working there with the dogs. And he said he didn't get the job, but then George said that they burned the barn down with all the dogs in it. So I'm like, well, shit, that's probably why he didn't get the job. They were already planning on killing all these things. Telling you, Western Pike County is wild. So I just scrolled down, and Courtney Francisco for WCPO, thank you very much for live tweeting today. Even though we were all watching it, you were great. George testified that they did have a dog kennel fire, and close to 100 dogs died in the fire. And he said he doesn't know how, but a few years later, Angela started it up again with like doodles and stupid shit. George said his mother was always upset with him because he was always leaving his brother to do all the chores on the farm. George said that Angela, quote, she'd always throw a fit for me leaving my brother, adding that in contrast, Jake stayed and worked all day when my mom told him to. George testified that she basically expected them to work like 40, 50-hour weeks for free. She had pigs at one point too. He said what kind of pigs they were. It was some kind of like designer pig, which, whatever. She also made up a breed of beagles that isn't a thing. So there's that. But he said he would half-ass do his chores to get them done faster. Head over to part 7. Part 7, let's go. George testified in late 2007 or 2008. He would have been, I forget what year he said he was born, but we almost have the same birthday too. He said his birthday at the beginning. And I think it's like October 4th or something, but we almost have the same birthday. It's very unusual for Libras to be like this. I mean, it's just uncommon. We can't make up our mind for nothing, especially to commit to killing somebody. So he said in 2007, 2008, he would have been like 16 to 17. I think he said he was born in 91. The Kentucky Wonder Mansion burned to the ground. I know, I'm devastated too. He said at this point they had gone on a week vacation to Alaska to visit some people that they knew, which were the Cinereskis that came up they were from Memphis. They knew them through church, and they are part of the church where Jake met Beth. So, as part of a way to make money for the move, they burned down the Kentucky Wonder Mansion. Ultimately, Billy decided he didn't want to move at this point, that he wanted to stay. So instead of moving to Alaska, they stayed and built their home on Bethel Hill. At this point, Tabby was around. I don't know if they were married. I assume so. Um, but George was talking about his mother deciding to burn this house down. And he said he didn't know when they were going to burn it, but he said that he didn't want to do it. Him and Tabby got their shit and got out. And then he said his brother set the fire. He wasn't sure when, but one day when he was working on a truck, the fire started and he thought, well, here they go burning another house. Look at this picture. Well, there they go burning another house. So, sidebar here, George is likable. He is. You got to keep reminding yourself of what we're talking about, why he's here, because George is a likable character. So the new house that they built on Bethel Road was a one-story home with a basement that was built from the ground up on the property. Now it eventually was also burned because, why wouldn't it be? This is the house they burned because Angela was mad that Frederica was leasing out the property because this was built on Frederica's property. Now, at one point, George said he thought that his grandmother owned about 3,000 acres, which is probably right. I haven't looked her up or anything. You know what? Hold on. I'm going to look her up. Pike County Auditor. 2 pages of results for Frederica Wagner, and I assume that this is not getting into anything else. Now, her son's name is on a lot of these. Her son being Billy, the one who hasn't gone on trial yet. That's interesting. Also, I wonder who this property will go to when she kicks the bucket, because it's just a matter of time. Head over to the next part. Part 8. So, over here doing a little digging around on Google Maps here. Do you want to see what I'm pretty sure is the remnants of the Kentucky Wonder Mansion? Right there. On the land of the Flying W. Also, there's some tiny horses. Later, when they get into testimony talking about the Goose House, this is the lake where the Goose House was, also on the property of the Flying W. Down here is the Flying W itself. I believe that is the house, and then these are barns and outbuildings. Not positive, but I'm pretty sure this is the house that was built after they burned down the Kentucky Wonder Mansion, because he described it as one big structure with kind of like a side building over here, and then it has another one over here that's a garage. So that's probably it. It said it was like 10 by 17 or something like that, which would probably be that room that was for growing marijuana. Growing marijuana? Church. Makes perfect sense. Here is the church on the property of the Flying W. I don't know which one is the Crystal Springs home. It's marked as the middle of this road. So I don't know if it is the remnants of the Kentucky Wonder Mansion over here. Allegedly, I'm just assuming if it's turned into this house, if it's at the church, I'm not real sure where it is. Here's the trailer hood. More trailers. Pretty sure these are also part of it because she owns property that the addresses are on Loy's Run. And that, to me, looks like a horse corral. More trailer hood. There's a pretty cool old cemetery on the property, though. Wouldn't mind exploring that. Look how uniform these trees look. Kind of creepy. So I did a little more digging, and I found where the Wagner home on Bethel Road would have been. This is 845 Bethel Hill Road. It is actually across the street from that cemetery that I just showed, and up a really, really friggin' long driveway. If you remember, it was also burnt to the ground. And bro, like, venture out when you're planting trees or something. Like, don't plant them in straight ass lines. I also find it hilarious that literally, like, here's the entrance to the Flying W. There's the damn fire department. I mean, it's a volunteer fire department. It takes them forever to get out. But, like, I love that they burned all of these. There's the driveway, by the way. They burned all these houses everywhere. And there is a fire department right down the hill. Wonder Mansion. 3 minutes of that to find out that Frederica Wagner owns a grand total of 1,767 acres in Pike County and around 2,000 acres in Scioto County. That's the ugliest fucking gate I've ever seen. Also, Frederica Wagner's tax-paying, God-fearing. Okay, sure. Anyway, head over to part 9 to get back to the actual story and not my sidebar of, like, giving you a Google Earth tour of the Part 9, back to regularly scheduled things and not me touring Google Earth. George went into more of his family's crimes. When asked to recount some of them, he said that he could go on for days about the illegal things that his family did, and I don't doubt him on that. He said that his dad and mom stole a truckload, a semi trailer of Rocky boots, and divided it 3 ways. It was thousands of boots. They did get in some trouble over this, but I don't remember like what happened to him. I don't feel like it was anything. And he also said that his dad stole a semi truck full of hot tubs, and that he and his family went around selling hot tubs to everybody. So I would honestly probably wouldn't kick somebody off my porch that came up with a bootleg hot tub. Like, I'd give it some thought. I mean, probably wouldn't. It's kind of receiving stolen property, but like, maybe. As if the shit we're all buying at these wholesale auctions on Facebook isn't stolen, but whatever. That's just a joke. Please don't come after me, and please don't kick me out of your groups. I love them. When talking about his relationship with his father, George said that when he was young, his relationship with Billy was good. And then, the daddy issues kicked in for Billy, and he began abusing pills and medications while doing long-haul trucking routes, probably Adipex, if I had to guess, which is just an amphetamine. George said that these pills made him irritable and quick to anger. He also said that Billy was hard of hearing and that Billy would always think you were yelling at him when really he said we were just yelling to get his attention. So that's not fun. He talked about several fights, like fist fights he got in with his dad. And of course he won all of them. He's a big, tough man. One of the fights he was talking about getting a window busted on himself that his dad punched out. He talked about another one where they were fighting using a rope that Billy was going to like try to use the rope to tie George up. But ended up wrapping it around George's throat, and George ended up like knocking Billy off his feet and like beat the shit out of him. I believe he said that it didn't end well for him. George did seem a little bit emotional, and like his voice seemed to crackle, and he seemed genuinely bothered by the relationship with his dad. And he said that his dad would call him dumb and said that he wouldn't listen, that he was ignorant. And then they would always fight over it. Now, I forgot to mention earlier, we've gone over this, but the Wagner boys were homeschooled. Angela didn't believe in people, that she thought everybody was trying to, essay her kids and grandkids. So she homeschooled them. George said he stopped being educated around age 14, and Angela did the books for him. And I assume she did that for Jake as well. Head to the next part.